Take a Bible, turn to two places. Turn to the book of John chapter 14 and Revelation chapter number 21. John chapter 14 and Revelation chapter 21. The title of the message this morning is The Living Room. The living room. We've talked for the last several weeks about heaven. We talked about the throne room. That's the place where God's at. Last week we talked about the altar. That's the place where the blood's at. Today we want to talk about the living room. That's the place where we'll be at. And if you have some loved ones that are in heaven, I believe that's the place that they're at as well. Just going to read one verse from John chapter 14. It's verse number 2. However, that one little verse is just packed with truth. Look at John chapter 14, verse number 2. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. We're talking about heaven. This is Jesus making a promise about heaven. There's several truths that you really ought to see in this particular Bible passage. For example, you ought to notice the fact that he defines heaven as the place called his Father's house. I think that's the best definition you can give heaven. What's heaven? It's God's house. It's the place where God lives. But also notice, he says, I go to prepare a place for you, but he says before that, in my Father's house are many mansions. Even before Jesus left to go prepare a place for us, there were already many mansions in heaven. The word mansion, some people argue over it. Our Bible uses the word mansion, but the Greek word is rooms. It is rooms. You say, well, why did our translators translate it mansions? Because they knew they weren't going to just be anybody's room. These are going to be some very, very special rooms. However, what he's talking about in that verse really doesn't relate to us at all. He's saying, before I even leave, before I even begin to prepare your place, you need to know there's already many magnificent mansion-like rooms in heaven. I got a feeling what he went to build for us is much, much better than even that. However, the promise that I do want to focus on, the truth that I do want to focus on from this verse is what he said, I go to prepare a place for you. Now go over to the book of Revelation, chapter number 21, and notice the fulfillment of that prophecy. Revelation chapter number 21. He made a promise and he kept it. Verse 1 says, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. I believe that New Jerusalem is the fulfillment of the promise that Jesus made. He went to prepare a place for us, and this is the city, I believe, that he has prepared for us. This morning, for a moment, let's look at 4 thoughts related to this place that you and I will go to live. Number 1, would you notice there are 3 news. There are 3 news, N-E-W-S. In that first verse, he tells us there's a new heaven, there's a new earth, and there's a new city. He gives us the name of the city down in verse number 2. It's called New Jerusalem. Jesus went to heaven, and when he got there, he prepared a place for us. Revelation chapter number 21 is not telling us about the new city's creation. It's telling us about the new city's relocation. He's placing New Jerusalem where it will be for all eternity. However, the fact that he's just placing it at that point in time does not mean that he's just creating it. I believe it's already created. Again, he mentions 3 new things, a new heaven, a new earth, a new city. It's obvious he hasn't made a new heaven or a new earth yet. How do you know? Because we're on the old one. We're on the old earth. We're still up underneath the old heavens. So he's not made that yet. But then again, he didn't promise in John chapter 14 that he was going to go make a new heaven and a new earth. He promised he was going to go make a place for us, and that's the new city, Jerusalem. Now, I don't like to use the phrase, I believe, a lot when I preach. I like to preach from things that we know that the Bible says, but you will find me making reference several times today and using that phrase, I believe, because I do believe it, And because I want to take some of the truths that we're going to see today, and I'm afraid there'll be quite a few of them, and try to weave them in so that you know more than just the facts about heaven. I want you to understand this is a place that God has prepared for us. And I want you to understand that if you've got loved ones already over there, they're already experiencing the joys of what he's going to be describing in these verses. Verse number 1, he tells us of 3 new things. Notice also in verse number 1, he tells us that this new city is as a bride prepared for her husband. Of course, a city's not a bride, but the church is the bride of Christ, and Jesus is the groom. And he refers to this city as being the bride because it's the city he's prepared for the bride. And he has adorned that city with the same glory he's going to adorn his bride with. So he compares them together simultaneously. I believe New Jerusalem is the place that God has prepared for us, the New Testament saints, to live. I believe the new earth that he's talking about is the place that God has prepared for the Old Testament saints to live. You say, why? Are there going to be borders and boundaries in heaven? No, I don't believe so. I just believe primarily the place that the New Testament saints are going to dwell at is this place called New Jerusalem. While primarily the place the Old Testament saints are going to dwell is on this new earth that he'll make. You say, preacher, why do you make that? Because of the promises that God's made in the Bible. Now, you keep your place at Revelation chapter 21, but I'm going to read a verse from Daniel chapter number 7. Daniel chapter number 7, Daniel's seeing a vision. And he's seeing something that's going to happen in the future, and it relates to the earth. He's going to talk about kingdoms and dominions that are on this earth. Listen to the verse 27 of Daniel 7. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Now, I know that verse doesn't make a lick of sense to you because it's pulled completely out of context. It's part of the big vision that Daniel was having. But Daniel was seeing the end of time, and what he was seeing was all the kingdoms of this planet, all the powers of this planet. And he was saying that God was taking them and giving them to the people of the Most High. The people of the Most High in the Old Testament is not the church. We're not around then. The people of the Most High in the Old Testament are the Jews. But what you need to understand is he says this becomes an everlasting kingdom. You know something about everlasting? It don't end. You and I have everlasting life. You know what that means? It don't end. He creates on this earth an everlasting kingdom, and he gives it to the people of the Most High. That means they're going to have dominion over this planet. It's going to be their kingdom, and it's going to be theirs everlastingly. Once he gives it to them, he'll never take it away again. Now, what he's describing in these first 2 verses is God is going to take a new city, New Jerusalem, I believe already created, but he's going to take it and put it in a new location. You got heaven. He's going to hang it in between the new heaven and the new earth, and it's just going to stay there suspended all by itself. When he does that, he will literally expand the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, whichever term you prefer to use. He will expand it from God's throne all the way down into that new city, Jerusalem, all the way down to this new earth, so that Jesus' prayer, the prayer that he prayed in Matthew chapter 6, verse number 10, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, will finally be answered. These 3 new things will be linked together. The place where God lives, the uttermost heaven. The place where we live, the new Jerusalem. The place where Israel primarily lives, the new earth. All of it will be God's kingdom, and his will be done throughout it all. I know you're Baptist. Sometimes a little shiver runs up and down my spine. I say, somebody ought to get Pentecostal. It's an amazing thing to realize how close we are to the very promises, prayers of God coming to pass. he's describing 3 new things to create something that's never been exactly like that before. Number 1, 3 new things. Number 2, the new city. Now, he begins to describe the new city, Revelation chapter 21, verse number 1, and it goes really all the way through into the next chapter. Throughout that chapter, he's given us facts about this heavenly place. When I first made mention of the fact that I preach on heaven quite often, most of you probably thought these Bible passages, because these are the Bible passages that I preach on at funerals. And the reason I preach on them so much at funerals is because this is where I believe your loved ones are right now. We need to understand some of these truths. There's more to it than I can bring out in one message, but let me give you as much as I can in the time, in more than the time that's allotted, okay? Because we know I'll go a little bit long. Let's start by reading some of these verses. Pick back up Revelation chapter 21, and let's read beginning at verse number 10. John says, "And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God, having the glory of God. And her light was like unto a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal, and had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. And the city lieth 4 square. The length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with a reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured the wall thereof, 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of the angel. And the building of the wall of it was like jasper, and the city was pure gold, like unto crystal. Now, we could keep reading. I'm going to refer to some other verses, so you keep your Bible open and make sure I'm not exaggerating things. But he's describing this glorious city. Let's look at some of the things that he tells us. Verse number 10, he does tell us again that this city is suspended. It's placed in its new location, already existing. Our loved ones are already walking through these streets, but it has not yet been placed in its eternal position because he has not yet created the new heavens and the new earth that it will hang between. He goes on to describe this city. He says it is 4 square. I believe that's, let me make sure before I say it. I wanted to say that's verse number 17. Well, back up. Verse number 16, he tells us that it has a wall that goes around it and that it is 4 square. That means it's as deep as it is wide as it is tall. He gives us the measurements of it. The measurement is 12,000 furlongs. You and I don't use furlongs as a measurement anymore, so that doesn't mean anything. If you convert the 12,000 furlongs into miles, you'll find out that that's approximately 1,500 miles. Now think about that. He's describing this city. He's measuring this city. It's 1,500 miles deep, 1,500 miles wide, 1,500 miles tall. You know, you can actually talk distance, and even though we use that distance, you still don't know how far that is. How far is 1,500 miles? If you were to leave from Miami, Florida, and drive to Boston, Massachusetts, you would travel 1,539 miles. Now, I understand that they measure from City Hall to City Hall. So from City Hall of Florida, Miami, Florida, to City Hall of Boston, Massachusetts, you would actually overshoot the distance of this new city by 39 miles. That's a long distance. If you were to drive 1,500 miles at 60 miles per hour and not stop, not slow down, not speed up, but drive straight through, it would take you 25 hours in a car driving from one end of heaven, this new city of heaven, to the other end of that heaven. Oh, but wait a minute. That's just 1,500 miles in one direction. It's also 1,500 miles wide, and it's also 1,500 miles tall. Some people wonder sometimes if that one new city could be big enough for all of the people that will get saved. First, I have to say, I don't think that many folks are actually getting saved. I wish population would be a problem in heaven, but I got a feeling it won't be. But if you were to knock off the space on earth that's covered by water, you would find out that earth really does not have that much land for people to live on. And I don't know where they get these figures, but according to this source, they say the entire planet has 57,491,000 square miles of land. That is a heap of land. If you were to measure out 1,500 by 1,500 feet, you'd find out that that's only 2,250,000 square miles. So this new city, 1,500 by 1,500, would only be 1/25th of all the land that's available on earth today. But wait a minute. It's not just 1,500 by 1,500. It's 1,500 by 1,500 by 1,500. Now, I don't know that God will do this. There's no reason in the world except for my vivid imagination to think that God might do this. But if God would have put another floor in that new city, 1 mile above the other floor, and do that again, and do that again, and do that 1,500 times, you would have enough land mass inside that new city to build 58 different earths just like ours today. You would have the land equivalency of 58 different planet earths for us to live on. You say, will God do that? I kind of doubt it. I don't think we're going to have that many folks, but I am telling you, God could make a city big enough for all of us to live in without any problem at all. He's describing in verse number 16 the city. He continues in verse number 17 to describe the wall that goes around the city. He tells us that particular wall is 144 cubics. 144 cubics. We don't use cubics today. So we convert that over to feet. The wall stands 214 feet tall. Now there's things about heaven I don't understand. You got a city that goes up 1,500 miles, and you got a wall that only goes up 214 feet, going all the way around it. It would look like an anthill up against Taj Mahal if you were standing at a distance to look at it. I don't know why God puts it there, but it's there. The Bible tells us, like the city, it's a square. It goes all the way around the city. It has 12 gates going into it, 3 on each of the 4 sides. It's a cube. The city's a cube, the wall's a cube, so there's 3 gates on each of the 4 sides. Each one of those gates is named after one of the tribes of the nation of Israel. Each one of those gates has its own angel standing outside of the gate. I don't know what the angel does. Best I can tell, he's a Walmart greeter. He just says howdy as you're coming in and howdy as you're going out. Each one of those gates, 12 gates, each one of them is made out of a single solitary pearl. Verse number 25 tells us those gates never, ever close. They're always open. If you've ever heard a song or heard a story or read a novel about somebody standing before Peter just outside the gates and having to be checked off to make sure that he can get in through the gates, understand there's no truth to that at all. If you get to the place where the gates are, you'll find them open and you will have free access to walk through those gates. Bible also tells us that that wall's made out of jasper. It's a jasper that's clear as stone. Typically on our planet, jasper is a green color. God seems to like the color green. Maybe that's why he called this the Green Pond Baptist Church. I don't know. But that's the wall that goes around this glorious city. The Bible continues to give us descriptions about the different elements of this city. He begins to describe in verse number 18 and 21 the gold that's used in this city. The Bible tells us gold is used at least twice. In verse number 18, it tells us the entire city is of gold. In verse number 21, it tells us that once we step through one of those pearly gates, we'll be standing on a street of gold. It's interesting, if you'll read verse number 21 carefully, you'll find out there's just one street mentioned. It's called the street. Maybe there's other little streets, I don't know, but there's the street of gold that goes through that city. Both times when it's mentioned, both in verse number 18 and again in verse number 23, when gold is mentioned, it's mentioned as being clear or transparent. Verse number 18, he describes the gold that's in the walls like unto clear glass. Verse number 21, he describes the gold that's in the streets as it were transparent glass. Makes me think, and this is just a carnal mind trying to figure out heavenly things, but it makes me think this place is mostly clear, mostly transparent. The walls are made out of a gold so pure that it's clear as glass. You can look right through it. It's as transparent these streets are, so that you can look straight through it. My carnal mind, boy, I wish I didn't have one, but I do. It makes me wonder, well, if everything's made out of clear glass-like gold, aren't we going to have some modesty issues when we get to heaven? And so I spent some time thinking about that. First of all, you don't need to incorporate earthly problems into heaven's diagram. I'm sure God's got a plan. But then again, I got to thinking, but no, you still won't have a problem. Because even if everything is as clear as glass, the Bible says in verse number 23 that the S-U-N does not shine in that place. The S-O-N shines in that place, so that that bright, vibrant glass would be reflecting the glory of Jesus. You'd never have to worry about seeing anything except for the reflection of Jesus Christ throughout that city. He begins to describe in chapter 22, verses 1 and 2, a river that flows apparently through that city. I say apparently, because in verse number 1 of chapter number 22, he makes this statement. He makes the statement that it starts at the throne of God. This river of life starts at the throne of God. Now, wait a minute. If you were here at the beginning, you know the first room that we looked at was the throne room. That's back in Revelation chapter number 4. The throne is described in Revelation chapter 4, verses 4 and 5. And as he's describing that throne, John never did mention seeing a river come out of the base of that throne. Seems to me that he would have mentioned that. He mentions a lot of other things. He mentions the sea of glass. He mentions the four creatures. He mentions the sound that comes out of the throne. But he doesn't mention a river of life coming out of the base of that throne. So I'm wondering, how does this work? And then I get to thinking, well, that was several chapters back. Maybe there wasn't a river of life coming out of his throne when John first got there. But now God has set New Jerusalem in its eternal place. And now it would appear as though coming out of the throne of God, out of the throne room of God, this river of life begins to flow. In my mind, I see it flowing in a lot of places. He's describing it in Revelation chapter 22, flowing through the new city. Now, wait a minute. We've got the heaven, we've got the new city, then we've got the earth. The Bible tells us in verse number 10, this new city is suspended between heaven and earth. So we've got stair steps. We've got heaven, we've got the new city, we've got earth. If this river starts at the throne room of God, and if it's now in chapter 22 flowing through the new city, my mind tells me it's got to come out of that throne, flow through some parts of the place where God abides. But when it gets to the end, like a beautiful cascading waterfall, it falls out of the very heavens itself down onto this new city. And then it begins to weave its way through the new city as described in Revelation chapter 22, verses 1 and 2. Now the verse doesn't tell us, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't stop at New Jerusalem. I suspect when it gets to the end of that 1,500-mile city, it goes over the sides of the new city and forms another beautiful cascading waterfall, maybe multiple cascading waterfalls in different spots off of that new Jerusalem, landing on this new earth, watering this beautiful planet that God has created. The Bible does tell us one thing about this river. It tells us in verse number 2 that on either side of it there were trees growing, just the same kind of tree. But every month the tree puts on a different kind of fruit. I suspect as soon as that water hits on this new city, Jerusalem, these trees begin to grow. And everywhere this winding river goes, you'll be able to tell it not just by the sound of the rippling brook, but you'll be able to tell it by the beauty of the trees that surround it. And then I suspect if it hits the planet Earth, which I think that it does, everywhere on this planet that river winds, and I suspect it will wind in many, many places. You'll see these beautiful heavenly trees producing unique manners of fruit, a fruit in each month out of the year. He's describing for us this new city, this place where if you have loved ones that have died, that were saved, that's where they are. Now, there's so many other facts, so many other truths that should be understood. I don't have the time to elaborate on them. Revelation chapter 21, verses 19 and 20 tells of the beautiful stones that make up the city's foundation. Some of the most precious stones that we have on this planet, God used as sub-basement so that he can build his city on top of it. Now, wait a minute. Why would God do that? Why would God use the precious gems of this planet as a foundation for this glorious city? I think it's so that no matter where you see this city from, whether you're above it and you see the reflections of the glory of God bouncing back off of these walls of gold, clear as glass, or whether you're standing in the midst of this city and these beams are beaming all around you and you're surrounded by the glory of God, or whether you're on the earth looking up from the bottom, no matter where you look at, you're going to see the glorious light of God shining through this city so that it's beautiful from every angle that you look at it from. It is a city prepared as a bride for her husband. He describes other things. Revelation chapter 21, verse number 22, there'll be no temple there. The reason there's no temple there is because Jesus is there. You don't have to go someplace to worship. You've got God with you everywhere you go, so you can worship him at all times. Revelation 21:24 says the nations of the earth will come to Jerusalem to worship God during that time period. New Jerusalem is still up in the heavens. That's our city, but Israel will have their Jerusalem. It'll be the capital of the world, and the nations of the earth will come there to their city to worship God. Chapter 21, verse number 27 tells us there'll be no sin there. Nothing that can defile will be in this new Jerusalem. And Revelation chapter 22, verse number 3 tells us the curse and all of its ramifications have been removed. There's no more curse in existence in God's new heavens, God's new earth. All of this are the facts that describe the place that we're going to live at, I believe, as soon as we close our eyes in death on this place. And I think it's describing where our loved ones are living at even now. Number one, would you notice the three news? Number two, would you notice the new city? Number three, would you notice the new nature? The new nature. Go, if you would, chapter 21, look at verse number 4. Chapter 21, verse number 4. And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. And there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying. Neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. God's changed the nature of some things. He lists 5 things that won't be there. There won't be any sorrow. There won't be any tears. There won't be any crying. There won't be any death. There won't be any pain. He's describing a new nature for creation, but he's also describing a new nature for us. We won't have any pain. We won't have any tears. Well, now wait a minute. Let's think about this. Where are we at in time? Time's irrelevant to God, but it's very relevant to us. Every day we have a birthday cake, or every year we have a birthday cake. We add another candle. Why? It means we've got one more year of happiness on this earth that we have lived, but I'm afraid it means we've got one less year on this earth to live. We have a limited number of days, so time's very relevant to us. Where are we at in the scope of time right now as he's describing this city? Well, everything that relates to human nature, to the human beings is done. The tribulation has come and gone. The Antichrist has come and fallen. The 1,000 years of millennial reign have come and gone. Indeed, the judgment of man has come and gone. Every sin that will ever be committed has now been committed. Every sin that has ever been committed has now been judged. Every sinner that has ever lived has now been judged. That means the saved, their sin account has been totally eradicated, but the lost, those that don't trust Jesus Christ as their saviors, have already been cast in the lake of fire and brimstone forever and ever. Question: how can we not weep over that in heaven? I hope you've got a lot of loved ones that are in heaven. And I hope as I preach about heaven, it stirs your heart and comforts your heart, because you can imagine your loved one being there. But I am equally sure we have some loved ones that have died that didn't go to heaven. And when we think of that, does that not bring sorrow to our heart and tears to our eyes? How can we ever enjoy this glorious place called heaven and never have a sorrow and never having a tear, knowing all of those that rejected Jesus Christ, died, This is another one of the many questions the Bible doesn't answer, so we just have to guess. And some people have made some pretty good guesses. Some people have guessed, well, when God gives us that glorified body, he just won't give us tear ducts. We can't cry, we don't have tear ducts. Yeah, but we can still be sorrowful, even if we don't have the tears. So I don't think that's the right answer. Some people have guessed, well, God will take away our memories, the memories of the sins that we have done and the people that we have known. That's a possibility, but I don't think it's a good one. Truth of the matter is, we are our memories. God has done a lot of work in our lives to make us who we are. And our memories, the things that have happened in our life, is a big part of us being who we are. It's because of what we have experienced that we chose to trust Jesus Christ as our Savior. The people in our lives, both the good and the bad. And I don't think God could take away our memories without changing who we are. And I don't think God would ever want to do that. So I don't think God's going to erase our tear ducts. And I don't think God's going to erase our memories. You say, well, preacher, what do you think God's going to do? Here's what I think God's going to do, and it's just my guess. I think God's going to make us able to understand like He understands. You see, sometimes we forget that the one that loves us the most is not our mother, not our father, not our brother, not our sister, not our son, not our daughter. The one that loves us the most is God. For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son. I want you to listen to what I'm about to say. It's one of those important statements. God's love doesn't stop when He has to send you to hell. I'll say that again. God's love doesn't stop when He has to send you to hell. God will love you in hell just like He's loved you on earth. You say, well, then how in the world can He send me to hell? He'll send you to hell because that's what you chose. He made you a free will human being, and He has allowed you the privilege to choose where you will spend eternity. And God will honor your choice. He won't quit loving you. But through the endless ages, as He hears your screams, we won't, He will. As He hears your screams, He will remember this is what you chose to do. Maybe God will help us to understand the gift of choice and how precious it is, like He understands it. When He created the animals, He didn't give them a choice. When He created the sun, the moon, and the stars, He didn't give them a choice. When He created the stars, He said, shine, and they shone. And they'll shine until He tells them to quit shining. When he created the birds, he said, sing, and they'll sing. They'll sing until he tells them to quit singing. They've got no choice. But when he told Adam and Eve, don't eat of the forbidden fruit, they ate anyway. Why? Because they had free will. The two greatest gifts God gives, His Son and free will. You have a choice. I'm going to tell you a secret. If you're here and you're lost, I might not know you as well as I would like to. But I'm going to grieve over you when you die and go to hell. I am until He takes away the sorrow. Yesterday we went out and knocked on doors. It seemed like we were on Heaven Road there for a while. The first 3, 4, 5 doors, several folks came to the door. Every one of them testified that they were saved. And me and Chris Walton looked at each other and said, I believed them. I really did believe them. Then we kind of went to a lull for a while, and we didn't get anybody that was saved or acknowledging that they were lost. Most of the doors didn't get answered. But the last 3 or so doors that we knocked on were some of the most sin-hardened, I guess, I've ever seen. One lady out raking her yard, I walk up, I'm cutting up with her, trying to joke with her, want to talk to her about Jesus, tell her who I am. She doesn't get mean. She doesn't get ugly. I asked her if she said, oh, yeah, I'm saved. How do you know you're saved? That's none of your business, is basically what she told me. She said, I just believe I am. Well, have you ever been to a church? No, I don't go to church. I don't believe in going to church. And on I tried to talk, and finally I realized something's wrong. We're just not going to get anywhere. So I say, okay, would you take this? And at least she took my track. We go across the street, literally straight across the street. There's a whole bag of Bud Light cans in a plastic bag. Now, you drink beer. I'm not saying you're going to go to hell. But that tells me something when I walk up on a porch and there's a trash bag full of Bud Light beers. I know right away this is not somebody who's interested in serving Jesus Christ. So we knock on the door, and he comes to the door, and at first he's kind of friendly, and we introduce ourselves, and his countenance changed. He doesn't get ugly with us. He just turns right back around and walks in and closes the door behind him. Then we go directly across the street beside the house of the lady who was raking the leaves. Park in her driveway, and I'm getting out of the car. I didn't realize she was on the front porch, but she comes out. What do y'all want? What are y'all doing here? I'm Carl Hall. I'm the pastor of the Green Pine. That's about as far as I got. No, not interested. And she turned around and she walked away. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm a human being like everybody else is a human being. There's part of me that says, God's going to smite you down one of these days. You better stop and listen. But then the more I got to thinking about that, the more I realized these poor souls don't have any idea what they're doing. God sent somebody by to tell them His Son died for them on the cross. And they wouldn't even listen. It shouldn't be me that gets mad or angry or upset. It should be me that weeps and cries, because God loves those 3 folks. And God loves you. And God will love you forever and ever. But if you don't trust Jesus Christ as your Son, His Son, you will die and go to hell. God changes our nature. Somehow, you and I will remember them. You and I will love them. But you and I will understand they made the choice that they made. Talking about new things. There's 3 new things to start with: a new heaven, a new earth, a new city. Then we looked at the new city. Then we talk about the new nature. Let's talk about one more thing, a new everything. Verse number 5 of chapter 21. Verse number 5 of chapter number 21. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. I make all things new. Now, you could go through this chapter and you'll find dozens of things that he specifically spells out. I've tried to mention some, but I know I didn't get them all. But we see from verse number 4, he's even going to make us different, that new nature. But then he stands back and he says, everything is going to be made new. I don't know what everything is, but I know it's everything. I mean, he's going to remake all things new. Now, he doesn't get it all into the new glorified bodies that we're going to have. You'll have to go to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 15 to check those out. But he's going to create some new bodies for these eternal souls to live inside of. bodies that will never get sick, bodies that will never get tired, bodies that will never get old, bodies that will never forget, bodies that are perfect, will live forever and ever. And the Bible doesn't say what I'm about to say, but I believe it. I believe it's probably true. I'll just say I believe it could be true. I don't think he's just going to make bodies for us that are saved. I think he's going to make bodies for those that are lost too. I don't think so much it's the soul by itself that's going to be cast in the lake of fire and brimstone to suffer forever and ever. I believe God's going to create a body for those people as well. It'll be a unique body, an indestructible body. A body that can feel. As far as I know, the human soul has no senses. I don't know that. I've not been one outside of a body of clay yet. But as far as I know, the soul itself doesn't feel anything. That's the reason when you're sound asleep, somebody can come up and stick you with a pin or something, and unless it wakes you up, you might not feel it. You're oblivious to everything because it's your senses, the senses of your body, that give your soul the awareness of what's going on around it. So I've got the notion that God's going to create a body for those that are lost too. Sadly, it won't be a good thing, because that body will let them feel the pain, the fires, the torments of hell. And they'll feel it forever and ever and ever. I create all things new. Now, if you're here and you're unsaved, you might be thinking to yourself, why would God create such an awful existence for an unsaved person? I want you to listen. God's going to create heaven so high with His glory that we can't comprehend it. But God's going to create hell so low with its torments, we can't comprehend that either. As high as He exalts His glory in giving us the joys of heaven, that's how low He's going to take the tormented in the pains of hell. It's almost like we're both going the same distance, just in opposite directions. We're going higher than we can imagine in His glory. They're going lower than they can imagine in their judgment. Why would God do that? God would do that so that any human being with an ounce of sense in his head would know what choice they ought to make. Only a fool would choose damnation. He's made it so painful that there's really no question. Nobody with a thinking mind should ever want to go to that place when you've got the opportunity to trust Jesus Christ as your Savior. If He made them equal, somebody might debate, well, I just soon go here as go there. Ain't nobody ever going to say, I just soon be in hell as in heaven. You might be fool enough to make that statement when you're on earth, but 3 seconds after you get to hell, you'll regret you ever said it. Nobody in hell will ever say, I'm just as glad I went here as that I went. No, no, no. The distance between them is just too eternally far. Now, if you're here today and you've never trusted Jesus Christ, don't trust Him because you're scared. That's not a reason to get saved. The reason you need to get saved is because Jesus Christ died for you on the cross. And you love Him. And you want to live for Him and serve Him. But you do need to understand, if you don't get saved, you have a future just as sure as those of us that are heaven-bound. He's told us where we're going to go. And He's done it to give us comfort. When you have to lay on a bed of affliction, when you have a friend to betray you, when you have a pain in your soul that just can't be healed, you can close your eyes and you can see your living room. You can kind of arrange the furniture in your mind if you want to, because God's given us some very great details. I pray we'll rejoice at the heaven God's made for us. Would you bow your head, please, and close your eyes? Father, I thank you for the opportunity to preach. I thank you for the place to preach about. Lord, I regret that I don't have the words or the mind to be able to describe this place adequately. I pray that your Spirit would speak to our hearts in ways that we can't speak and would accomplish works that we cannot do. We'll do our best to give you the praise for everything that you